Coming in at number 10, we have Julia. Julia is my sister's name. Also, on the day of scripting this video, it is her birthday, so happy birthday, Julia. The best human alive, bar none. This story is not about my sister though, and while I'm sure I've made the odd demonically possessed joke about her in our youth, she most definitely is free of the devil. The Julia in this story, however, is filled with him. Apparently. A Yale graduate and self-expressed man of science, Dr. Richard Gallagher, experienced a possession so dastardly that it had him question his beliefs. The Ivy League educated, board-certified psychiatrist who teaches at Columbia University and the New York Medical College came across a woman named, you guessed it, Julia. Well, that's what we're calling her. Anyway. She was a strange woman with flowing black clothes and gothic makeup. She proclaimed herself queen of a satanic cult, but she had approached a priest because she was worried that she was possessed. Gallagher said that objects would fly off shelves around her and she knew odd details about Gallagher's life. The professor said that Julia started appearing to him even when she wasn't there. Creepy. Coming into number 9, bear with me on the pronunciation here, we have the Wan Uimata Makutu lifting. It was a mouthful. In 2009, a teenage girl died and another had her eyes gouged out during a Maori exorcism performed by her relatives who believed that they were cursed. The teens had stolen a lion statue from outside a pub and therefore were subjected to a several-day-long exorcism despite returning it. The surviving teenager recounted the experience, saying that her family stood around her in a circle in water and her grandparents actually came home and told her to go with peace and love. She arrived at hospital with her eyes oozing blood and claimed that she'd been forced to drink urine and repeatedly was kicked by her family. The lengthy trial of the girl's family members lasted 29 days. It made headlines and caused a lot of controversy as many Maori people supported the practice of Makutu. One uncle and 4 aunts were found guilty of the drowning and abuse. Honestly, so intense. So is demonic possession real or can it easily be faked? Consider this at number 8. That's right, we are talking about Martha Brosier. Martha Brosier lived in the mid-1500s and was accused of fraud after it was suspected that she had actually faked demonic possessions, which at the time did bring her considerable fame. She said she suffered a shortness of breath, she could not stick out her tongue, and she would regularly gnash her teeth together. She'd spasm and complain of voices in her head. How was her fraud discovered? It seems that she was tricked into drinking holy water under the guise of normal water, which reportedly had no effect. Right, so that solves that then. How she was able to speak with her mouth shut in fluent and intelligible French, English and Greek is an utter mystery. Coming into number 6, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. This is one Ed and Lorraine Warren case that even the pair of spooky investigators who by and large had seen it all were absolutely scared of. The story starts off with an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel. Along with Catholic priests, the pair were called in to try and rid the boy of demons. Over several days of grueling spiritual work, the group believed that they had exorcised the unwanted spirit. But there was a dramatic twist. The Warrens claimed that the demon actually fled into his brother, 18-year-old Arnes, although they didn't realize at the time. Just months later, Arnie wasn't feeling himself at all, and then one night he killed his landlord in an argument. His defense lawyer argued that he was possessed, and the Warrens were even called in to testify in court. The pair claimed that actually they did believe him to be possessed by none other than the devil. After their testimony, Arnie served just 5 years in jail and was released in his mid-20s. We don't actually know where he is now or what he's up to. I don't even know if the devil was ever exorcised from him. Coming into number 5, we have Mademoiselle Elizabeth de Ranfeng. Mademoiselle Ranfeng became a widow in 1617, after which she was heavily courted by her physician, her doctor. It seems that he would buy her gifts, and after she rejected him, he prescribed her a liquid which was later thought to have been a love potion. She started behaving strangely, but the man continued to treat her with potions. It is thought that he infected her with the devil. The ailments that she suffered led people to believe that she was possessed, and she was exorcised in 1619. During her exorcism, it was said that a demon presented itself and spoke in French, Greek, Latin and Hebrew, and Italian. The demon was reportedly able to know and recite the thoughts and sins of the various individuals who examined her. The demon was super persistent, but eventually Mademoiselle Ranfeng was cured, thankfully. The physician who had slipped her the potions, unfortunately though for him, was burned alive for practicing magic. Cripes, the 17th century was a very intense time, the stakes were very high. Coming into number 4, one of my favourite historical figures I had no idea they'd been exorcised, we have Salvador Dali. I love me a bit of Salvador Dali, especially in the extreme moustache years. The 20th century surrealist artist created some thought-provoking and subversive work, such as The Persistence of Memory and The Lobster Telephone. Hello. The Spanish visionary regularly offended the Catholic Church, and however in his later life the artist did write in defense of the religion, which is, I guess, kind of confusing. Friar Gabriel Maria Berardi claimed to have performed an exorcism on Dali in France in 1947. Allegedly, the artist created a sculpture of Christ and gave it to the friar as a thank you. The man certainly was quirky, but expressly so in the 1930s and early 40s. Perhaps the genius behind his work all along was the devil, but honestly, if I was going to put my money on it, I'd say it was likely the absinthe. 2. We have Mother Teresa. Did you know that she was exorcised? Mother Teresa is considered to have been one of the holiest women to have ever lived. The woman received a Nobel Peace Prize, although I will say that other reports say that she was cruel and friends with top leaders of Masonic cults, so I don't know. Mother Teresa fell ill in 1996, breaking her collarbone. Now, months later she contracted malaria and suffered heart failure. It seems that the Archbishop of Calcutta ordered a priest to perform an exorcism because he thought that actually she was under attack by the devil. He said that she was very agitated and removed wires from her body in hospital. She died just a short while later.
Coming in at number 10, we have Amy Stamatis. KATV covered the story of a woman who nearly died after she fell from a window. It was a very suspicious case, and a lot of people were convinced that she jumped from the window in an attempt to take her own life. In the months leading up to the accident, Amy was plagued by horrible thoughts and nightmares. They were mostly voices that would pop in and out of her mind and tell her to harm herself. She was seeing several people about this. She went to a doctor and eventually saw a psychiatrist who prescribed her some medication, but the voices never stopped. Now, Amy said she was just sitting in the windowsill when she fell, but because of everything I just told you, you can understand why it would be hard to believe her story. Now, there is a good side to this. Because of this accident, Amy was visited by someone who practiced an unconventional form of medicine. She was apparently someone who would heal people through prayer. She worked on Amy and said that she saw demons inside her body. Apparently, this doctor of prayer was able to exorcise the demons out of Amy's body, and she wasn't plagued by dark thoughts or demons any longer. Coming in at number 9, we have George Lurkins. If you shoot back to the 1700s, you better believe that there's going to be your fair share of demon possession stories. George Lurkins was just a regular dude, and then out of nowhere he started to get sick and act very strange. He started to growl like an animal and walk on all fours. This was obviously concerning to the people who knew him and knew that he wasn't that strange of a fellow. So Lurkins was taken to a church where they performed a massive exorcism on him. Apparently 7 different demons were pulled out of his body, and then he was back to being just a normal dude. Coming in at number 8, we have the Corrupted One. Reddit user Dark Flash Knight had a very interesting story about seeing horrific things when they were sleeping, and they think it might have been a demon tormenting them. It started out of nowhere. They didn't move into a new house or encounter someone who was creepy or buy anything that might have been cursed. Those are all the usual suspects when crazy things start happening. They said they just started to have horrible dreams about committing crimes and doing sickening things to people. Their dreams were vivid, like they were watching everything happen through a first-person view of someone else, but they could feel and hear everything. It was like they were doing it, but they couldn't make themselves stop, even though they knew everything they were doing was wrong. This started to torment them so badly that they were afraid to even fall asleep. Eventually, they started to seek help. It didn't matter what pills they took, what therapists they saw, or who they talked to, nothing seemed to deal with the problem that they were having. Eventually, they told a friend who was concerned, and their friend was a medium who decided to host a seance for them. Through this, they discovered that there was a demon who was feeding off of their misery as they slept. They got rid of the creature through a series of blessings that the medium washed over the home. Coming in at number 7, we have Richard Gallagher and Julia. When you work for the church, it's only a matter of time before you have to go to battle with the devil. I mean, I think that's the case. I don't really know because I've never been to church. But for Richard Gallagher, that was for sure the case. Richard Gallagher was a professor in religious studies at Columbia University. He was eventually approached by a woman who only gave her first name, and that was Julia. Julia was a goth icon who claimed that she was the head of a satanic church. Now, why would she come to a man of God if she was always getting down and dirty with the devil? Well, it was because she was worried about being possessed. You play with fire, eventually you're going to get burned. Richard claimed that when he was around Julia, things would fly off the shelves and he would see her image appear when she wasn't there. Coming in number 6, we have Home Alone. This story scared the hell out of me. I couldn't find a news story about it, but there were a few stories about it floating around on the internet, and it freaked me out enough to throw it on this list. It's the story about a girl who is living alone and craving to be successful. I can vibe with that, but I don't think I would go to the lengths that this woman was willing to go to. She apparently started to use black magic, summoning and communicating with a demon to help her be the cutthroat winner that she always wanted to be. Apparently the people around her started to see her rise to the top, but she changed big time. Being around her would make you feel horrible. Not like she was mean or anything, like it would physically drain you. And then one day, out of nowhere, she was gone. This is someone who was becoming an icon in her field, and she vanished like when you take a ghost poop and there's no poop on the toilet paper. Eventually, police came to her apartment, and what they found was horrifying. There were demonic symbols all over the home, a massive pentagram etched into the floor, and animal sacrifices hanging from the ceiling. One of the most concerning parts about this was that there was a series of hoof prints that looked like they were burned into the floor. But this lady was nowhere to be found, and to this day no one knows what happened to her. Coming in at number 5, we have Stuck in the Basement. If you were to encounter a demon, I think this would be one of the worst things that could happen. This was pulled off of Bored Panda, and it followed someone who was doing some work in their basement. They were ripping up the floorboards, and then they found some satanic symbols and passed out. They woke up 2 days later when a friend came over to check on them. They had bruises all over their body and they were struggling to move. Their friend took them to the hospital, and they found out that they were extremely dehydrated and all their wounds on their body were self-inflicted. This person couldn't remember what happened to them at all, but they knew that something was in control of their body the entire time. He came back to his home once he was all patched up, and the symbols in his basement were gone. After this, he didn't have any issues, but he never got to the bottom of what happened. Coming in at number 4, we have Gina. Let's head back to the 90s for a possession story that was televised. This is the story of Gina, a girl who is clearly showing signs of psychosis, but her parents were convinced that she was possessed by a demon, so they had an exorcism performed on her that was shown on ABC, and 29 million people watched. Gina claimed that 2 demons were inside her body, Zion and Minga. After the exorcism, she was thankfully rehospitalized so she could receive proper help. Coming in number 3, we have The Nun. For this one, we're gonna have to blast back to the year 1676, and we are going to meet a nun named Maria. You think if you were a nun, you would be so close to God that you would be safe from anything demonic, but you would be wrong. When she was alive, Maria talked about how she would constantly struggle because she would get messages from demons. They would try to persuade her to do horrible things, but she was a lady of faith and she would push these thoughts and voices down. That was until she was 31 years old and found dead. It would seem that she had taken her own life, but what made this case so famous was the fact that she had a note on her that would be later called Satan's engram. The note took years to decode, but once it seemed that the message was sent from the devil himself and spoke of his distaste for foolish humans and how they thought they could use God to escape the prison of man, and other stuff about the river Styx and how we're all going to hell, you know, regular devil stuff. Coming in at number 2, we have Not the Dog. Apparently there's nothing sacred in the world anymore. I mean, you can possess people, or maybe aliens or robots, but pets, those are off the table. This story is wild. A Reddit user talked about how their family dog became the victim of possession. Apparently there was someone in their neighborhood who was a witch, and this witch had a cat, and their dog got into a scuffle with the cat, which left the cat pretty hurt. The witch confronted the family about it, and she wanted some sort of compensation for her cat's vet bills, which seems pretty fair if you ask me, but the family was like, no way! And instead of going down the traditional American route of suing the family, she put a curse on the dog to be possessed by a demon, which she told the family about. She wanted them to know that it was her. After this, the dog was literally insane. It attacked the family, it was destroying the house. They thought that they were going to have to put their their dog down, but there's nothing a family won't do for their family pet. So they made a plea with the witch to lift the curse in exchange for paying for the medical bills. And the witch obliged, and then the family dog returned back to normal. Now, I don't know who was right in this debacle, but I think the main lesson here is don't mess with witches because they are up to some crazy stuff.
Number 5. Pazazu Algared. Now this one is a little freaky because one of the people who lived in the same building as Pazazu swore he was possessed. The name Pazazu is actually the name of the demon mentioned in the film The Exorcist. Pazazu was arrested after authorities discovered a dead body in his backyard, along with another that he helped his wife bury a year prior. If there's anyone on this list that could actually have been possessed, then it might have been this guy. Maybe number 1. He was a satanic fanatic and even went so far as to fork his own tongue and saw his teeth razor sharp. Ugh. An anonymous quote from the man who lived with Pazazu said, quote, "It was very serpentine and his eyes would kind of get a little like glazy, like almost not there, like the inner part of him would kind of phase away. You could tell when his demons needed something from him because they took over." Unquote. Ugh. Also important to note that the house that he lived in was so gross, it was deemed unsafe for human life. There was filth, human and not everywhere, demonic and evil symbols on the walls. Ugh, yeah, not a place you'd want to find yourself, especially since the man who lived there might have been the demon Pazazu himself. Number 4. Michael Taylor. I swear there was something about the 70s that just like bred crazy wacko serial killers. Like, anyone else feel that way? Were they just there all along and we finally started to notice? I don't know. But we have yet another serial killer on our list who also claimed possession. Even before he violently took his wife's life, Taylor suspected that he was possessed by a demonic spirit. He was a simple butcher living in Ossett, England, who was suddenly overcome by a darkness he couldn't explain. He underwent an overnight exorcism performed on him on October 5th, 6th in 1974, and though it reportedly worked, some of the demons, yes, plural, kept hanging on. According to someone involved, they invoked and cast out at least 40 demons, though 3 remained. They were pretty bad. After he returned home, he viciously took the life of his wife, removing her eyes and tongue, most of her skin from her face, and took their pet's life as well. When police found Taylor, he was standing in the street covered in blood, yelling, quote, "It is the blood of Satan," unquote. I don't know what to believe about that one. Demonic possession doesn't seem like an afterthought here, whereas it does with the other ones, so what do you think, guys? Number 3, Deborah and Adolfo Gomez. Okay, whether for 5 minutes or 10 years, we all believed at some point that the prophecy about 2012 being the end of the world was true. But it appears no one believed as hard as Deborah and Adolfo Gomez, who were not only convinced that 2012 was the end of the world, but that their house was possessed by a demon. Yeah. The couple was arrested after restraining their children with duct tape in their SUV because they also were demon possessed. Apparently, they would often cover their eyes and mouths with duct tape in order to keep the demons out. Oh my god. When police finally caught up with them in Lawrence, Kansas, they also discovered that Adolfo hadn't slept for 9 days. How that happened, we don't know, but it may explain why he thought he was possessed. Sleep deprivation can cause some serious harm. The longest anyone has ever gone without it, I think, was 11 days. And after just 4 or 5 days of no sleep, people start to hallucinate, so maybe that's the reason. Number 2, Aljar Swartz. In 2013, Aljar Swartz from South Africa claimed he had become possessed by vague satanic attacks. Of course, he wouldn't be on this list if he didn't. This was verified by Reverend Cecil Begbie and confirmed that this was the cause for Swartz's crime. He strangled and then beheaded his victim in an abandoned school in October of that year. Oh my god. Reports say that Aljar planned on selling the head to a traditional healer. He was caught and incarcerated, however, but his community stood behind him, weirdly. Reverend Begbie instructed church groups across Africa to pray for Swartz on the Good Friday following his arrest. Swartz reportedly felt like pure water was washing over him at the time of the prayer, and now claims the demons are no longer in possession of him. This, however, will not mitigate his sentence. And lastly, number 1, Arne Cheyenne Johnson. Johnson sparked controversy far and wide in a case that became known as the Devil Made Me Do It case. In 1981, 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson was arguing with Alan Bono over Johnson's girlfriend when Arn stabbed Bono to death. When authorities arrived, you can guess what Johnson said. "The devil made me do it." Hence the title of the case. So you'd expect the officer to be like, yeah, whatever, buddy, keep on walking, but no. There is a reason this case is in our #1 spot. Every paranormal investigator worth their salt, including the beloved Ed and Lorraine Warren, flocked to Connecticut to interview him. But the Warrens were there to defend him because they already knew him. The Warrens told police that in July 1980, Johnson had participated in at least 3 exorcisms involving his girlfriend's 11-year-old brother David. He reportedly was host to 43 demons. The Warrens stated that at the time of the exorcism, and I quote, "Johnson leaped up and cried to the demon, 'Come into me, I'll fight you, come into me.' From that time on, he was possessed." Unquote. The Paranormal Society was split in 2, but Johnson's team was committed. The court had defended accounts of God in the past. Now, it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But despite what you may believe, it wasn't enough, and Johnson received maximum sentence, but was released after good behavior just 4 years later.